talking on eggshells. And Richard Branson said, time is the new money. And I think that time is a new trust. So that you trust this is going to be a good use of your time and money. Let's jump right in with a quote that you may find useful and relevant in your personal and professional life, and a quick backstory about why I wrote this book, Talking on Eggshells. All right. The world is full of good people. If you can't find one, be one, said Mother Teresa. And in case you're curious about the backstory, it's based on a communication process I developed more than 20 years ago called Tung Fu. Now, this is just two paragraphs, so hang in there with me, and hopefully the lights will go on and the band will play, and all of this will make sense about why this topic is needed by everyone at work, at home, online, and in public. When the name of the book was originally published, I had an opportunity to go on a media tour. I was flying to my first stop and needed to check a quote to make sure I had it right for an interview. I pulled out a copy of the book from my purse. A woman seated across from me glanced at the cover, yanked the book out of my hands, and said, "That looks interesting. Tell me what it's about." I said, "Well, it's how to handle difficult people without becoming one yourself." And she said, "Ooh, I wish I'd had your book on the plane before this one." She said, "I was seated next to the most obnoxious man. I could have used your book. I would have hit him with it." Well, that is not what Tung Fu or Talking on Eggshells is about. It's not about putting people in their place. It's about putting ourselves in their place so we can respond with compassion instead of contempt. And if you'd like to know what to do if people are complaining about something or accusing you of something that's not true or blaming you for something you didn't do, hang in there, because Phil and I are going to be sharing some stories and insights on how you can do just that so you don't have to talk on eggshells anymore.
Wow. So hitting people with the book, Sam, that's not what the book's about?
No, that's not exhibit A of how to think on our feet and handle challenging situations.
That's funny. That's quite a story. So I love that you share that, and love you talk about tongue fu. So why talking on eggshells, and why not just like a tongue fu 2.0 or 3.0?
I'm so glad you asked that because, see, I wrote Tung Fu more than 20 years ago. And guess what? There was no cell phones back then. There was no Zoom calls. There was no remote work. And so many of the challenging situations we face these days, I didn't even mention in that first book. And John Mackey, who is the founder of Whole Foods, gave the cover endorsement for Talking on Eggshells, said it's the course correct for today's cancel culture. We're living in a cancel culture. How can we be a pattern interrupt and be a force for good? That's what this book is about.
Cool. So you mentioned cancel culture. What like define that for us, and how your book is going to help us get through that and become a force for good.
You know, I hope, unless people are driving, I hope they get a piece of paper and put a vertical line right down the center. Because, Phil, you know how my brain works. I juxtapose everything. I think it's the quickest way to make complex ideas crystal clear and to show the shift. So, on the left hand column, put words to lose. And on the right hand column, put words to use. And on the left hand column, put cancel and put conflict. It's like the world is full of conflicts, divisive political opinions, people arguing about what went wrong and who dropped the ball, etc. And we're canceling each other out, and that's divisive. We want to be over on the right with cooperation and collaboration. Can I give you a quick example about how we can shift from conflict, a cancel culture, to a cooperative culture?
Absolutely. Please do, Sam.
Good. Okay. Let me tell you a quick story. It's one of my favorite stories. My 84-year-old Aunt Kay works in a hospital. In fact, she volunteers 5 days a week. She did this even during COVID. And I asked what it was like. She said it was stressful. I said, put me in the scene where someone like took their anger out on you. She didn't even have to think about it, Phil. She held up her phone. She said, a woman ran into the ER holding her phone up saying, my daughter was in an accident. She just texted me. She's in the ER. I need to get in and see her. Well, Kate called the ER. There was somebody already with the daughter. Now, you probably remember the rules. It was only one visitor per patient per day. And Kay had to be the one who gave that bad news to the woman. The woman lost it. She starts screaming at Kay, I can't believe this. How are you? Now, over on the left, if people are writing this down, put down two words, how rude. How rude. Why are you blaming me? I don't make the rules. You don't think I can do about it. And we go down this rabbit hole of resentment. Instead, over on the right, put these 4 words. How would I feel? How would I feel if my daughter were in the ER and I couldn't get in to see her? And Kay called the ER back and she said, "Who is with the daughter?" It was the Uber driver who had brought her in. And Kay was able to explain the situation and thank him, and he left, and the mother was able to get in with the daughter. Now, look at turning how rude to how would I feel moves us from contempt to compassion, from impatience to empathy, from there's nothing I can do to let me see if there's something I can do.
Wow. Wow, that's such a great story and such a great example for us. So is Aunt Kay, is she one of the examples that taught you all of this, or where did you get started with this shift of the language here?
I really love that you asked that question because I actually started my speaking career by speaking on concentration. I was working in Washington, D.C. I was working for an organization called Open University, and my job was to figure out courses that we could put on. I would read the Washington Post, and here was someone who sailed around the world. Let's bring them in for a session. Here's how to build your house from scratch. And one day I saw the word concentration 6 times on the front page of the sports section. Chrissy Everett said it was why she won the US Open. A golfer missed a gimme putt. I thought, wait a minute. We all wish we could concentrate better. I've never seen any books on this. I don't think we teach people how to do it. And instead of farming it out, I put together a course on concentration, and that started my speaking career. Now, to your question, I was speaking on concentration for the University of Hawaii. And Dr. Ray Oshiro was the one who said, Sam, we're getting a lot of complaints from our city government, our state government, federal government, from all our different companies that they're dealing with a lot of complaints. And what I realized, it wasn't that they couldn't concentrate, it's that they were dealing with all these difficult people. So I put together a course called Dealing with Difficult People Without Becoming One Yourself. And that launched my course into Tung Fu and Talking on Eggshells.
That's cool. That's cool. Paying attention is a good hallmark for you there. So how do you decide what to listen to and what not to?
Boy, Phil, I love your question, and good for you for picking up the word attention, because attention is the river that runs through my work. In fact, Mary Oliver said, instructions for a life: pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. So see, I pay attention. What are people having problems with? What can't they do? What are they concerned about? What's not working? Now, what could I create that would actually help solve that problem or address that need or have an answer to that issue? And so over the course of my career, you know that in our industry, Phil, it's often suggested that you pick a lane. I have deliberately selected not to pick a lane. I kind of am a Renaissance speaker, is that I find something that I think is really urgently needed, that's relevant, and that is not already saturated. I try and create a new step-by-step methodology around it that people haven't heard before, get real life examples to demonstrate it in action. And so I follow what my attention brings to my attention.
That's awesome. I like that. I really think that's a far more interesting thing to do than to just go 100 miles deep, and it does leave room for astonishment for sure.
Phil, because I know in your community, you have a lot of experts, entrepreneurs, speakers, writers, coaches, etc. So let's look at this one more time, because once again, the ubiquitous advice is you've got to pick a lane, you got to go deep, can't go broad, right? And I had an opportunity to go to the Leonardo da Vinci exhibit with my son, Tom, on Father's Day several years ago. And as I went around this magnificent exhibit, I kept thinking, what if someone had told Leonardo da Vinci, stick with anatomy, no more art for you? It's like, okay, now you're a pretty good artist, but forget that flight stuff. I mean, he had a peripatetic brain. He was interested in many things, and he was very brilliant at many things. And I could have, when I wrote 20 years ago, Tung Fu, I could have just stuck with that. Would have been a global empire. It would have been very lucrative. It could have been, an incredibly international enterprise. And I've selected not to do that. And Tung Fu is still selling 20 years later. It's just that if I'd stuck with that, I wouldn't have written Pop. I wouldn't have written Got Your Attention. I wouldn't have gone on My Year by the Water with Some Day Is Not a Day in the Week. And part of the reason I feel I'm wealthy in what matters is because I've had this incredibly rich and rewarding career with being able to dive into things that get my eyebrows up.
Cool. So how do you shut that out though? I mean, Sam, you and I are both involved in NSA. We hear that all the time, that the riches are in the niches. We have to do that. So how do you shut out the noise and do what you love?
Here's the thing, and I'm going to give you an example. And now she would tell the story, so I'm not talking out of school. There's a very talented woman named Cynthia Thurlow. Now, Cynthia Thurlow's TEDx talk on intermittent fasting, I think now it has about 14 million views. And so Cynthia was a client, and we were talking about her podcast. And I was saying, if you name your podcast Intermittent Fasting, guess what? After about a year of having all your functional med docs and having all your nutritionists, you're going to start repeating yourself. And it's going to be same old, same old. And yes, yeah, you will own that niche in perpetuity. It's just what quality of life will you have? Will you still have the light on in your eyes because you're being introduced to what's new? And so we deliberately named her podcast Everyday Wellness, because do you see how it gives her flexibility within her function? She's still on brand because she still talks with experts about intermittent fasting, and her book, she got a very nice book deal. So she is still an expert on that. However, do you see, by deliberately bringing in athletes and bringing in professors and bringing in CEOs and so forth, see, it's not an either or. You can have the best of both worlds by having a river that runs through your work, like mine is attention. So whether it is, my latest book, Talking on Eggshells, it's how in the middle of a conflict, we can shift people's attention so we're proactive instead of reactive, so that we're building receptivity instead of resentment. See, that's a form of attention, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Well, when we're in the middle though of it, I mean, that's too late to think about what we're going to do, isn't it? I mean, don't we have to prepare for that and have that practice ready so that when the time presents itself that we're there? So how do we prepare? How do we get ready for those situations, Sam?
I have the privilege of working with a lot of people who are trying to crystallize what their secret sauce is, because I really believe it's not enough to be one of many. We can't just be another leadership speaker. We can't just be another customer service speaker. It's like, no, what's our secret sauce? What is our EEE, our experience, our expertise, and our epiphanies that we're bringing to the table that are original, that haven't been heard before? How can we have first of their kind stories? How can we have a one of a kind methodology so that when people are reading our books or coming to our keynotes, once again, their eyebrows are up because they're thinking, I say that all the time. Now I know a better way to do that. It's like, I've never heard that before. I can do that today, so that we are relevant and compelling and actionable. So can I give you one of the techniques I use with my clients on how to come up with that?
Absolutely. Please do.
Okay. Now, if people are taking notes, please write down 4 A's. A, because this is one of the techniques I use to help people come up with how they're one of a kind instead of one of many, so that they break out instead of blend in, because blending in is for Cuisinarts, not for consultants or creatives, right? So the first A is avocation. And I often ask my clients, what do you do when you're not working? I'll give you a quick example. A woman named Jan Holman came up to me after a workshop, and she wanted to write. Now, at the time, she was a spokesperson for American Express. And here's the thing, there's a lot of financial advisors out there, isn't there, Phil? She would have been lost in the crowd. We don't want to get lost in the crowd. We want to stand out in the crowd. So I asked her the question, what do you do when you're not working? She said, I play golf. I said, we're in business, because vertical line down the center, put golf over on the left, and put finance over on the right. Now, what are the things that we do in golf? Well, we have a caddy, that's your financial advisor. We have the tee. Sometimes people try and overhit their drive, just like they do with an investment. They try and go too big. We hook it, etc. And now we get to the green. Not only is this how we develop fresh content for a familiar topic by using them as metaphors and using our stories, we can also come up with a one-of-a-kind title. So you know what the title of her work was?
No, what's that?
Go for the green. Come on. Now, let's see how we can be smart here, right? Because the clients I work with, it's not enough to come up with a one-off idea. How is it commercially viable? How will we get paid to speak on that? How will we turn that into a book that is going to get a book deal? How could we turn it into a TEDx talk? So think of the strategy of that. As you know, many conventions have golf tournaments before, correct? Now, she was a scratch golfer. So guess what? She could offer to give a short talk before the golf tournament. And look, she is getting in front of their high achievers, their high performers, their top salespeople, etc. It's a win for the company because it's making the golf tournament not just fun, it's making it actionable and relevant to their work. And she's meeting all the people who will then hire her for more speaking engagements, etc. So that's just one A. Now, I don't know what our time is. Do we have time to go into the other A's?
Sure, let's do it, Sam.
Okay. Now, I bet you know this individual, and many people in the speaking community may know Mike Wein, Wein, out of Atlanta. Now, I was speaking in Atlanta, and I had a chance to meet Mike, and he was working for PepsiCo, and he speaks on marketing. And when I talked to him about it, it was at that time, he was kind of struggling once again to break out because there's a lot of marketing speakers. So guess what? The second A is ability. I said, what are you good at? What are you excellent at? What do you do where you have achieved something, an ability, an achievement that is extraordinary? Well, guess what? He runs Ironmans. I said, Mike, why aren't you using that in marketing talks? And he said, Sam, it has nothing to do with marketing talks. Of course, it has everything to do with marketing. Put Ironman over on the left, put marketing on the right. You have to have a very clear goal, right? You have to have your team, right? You're going to run into the wall, correct, when you run out of steam or when you have the dark night of the soul. And so we came up with his title, which was, Mike would tell you, this is not my story, Mike would tell you, he was one of those kids growing up who was the last guy on the bench, last one picked for the team. Now, how could someone who is not athletic growing up be world class? I mean, just last year, he won the Disney Marathon, the New York Marathon, the Boston Marathon, and the Ironman Triathlon in his age group. How do you go from sitting on the bench to doing that? Aha. He said, I look for the specific edge. Whoo! I knew that's the title of your business, the Specific Ed Institute. That's the title of your keynote. Because what organization is not looking for specific edge? What sales team, marketing team is not looking for specific edge of their campaign? So check out Mike, and now he is a go-to keynoter in addition to doing what he loves. And integrating our passion into a profession isn't frivolous, it's good business.
Wow. Well, that's two of the A's, right? That's two of them. So what are the other two, Sam?
Another one is adversity. Is like, when is a time where you had something awful happen to you? You were in a car accident, you had a health challenge, you were fired, you went through breast cancer or something like that. Because once again, what is put on the right, the topic that you want to speak on, whether it's leadership, whether it's customer service, whether it's stress management, whether it's health, whether it's team building or whatever. Now, over on the left, put the adversity that you overcame and start writing down what were the turning points. What did you do when you felt hopeless and helpless? What did you do when you didn't know what to do? Over on the left, right? Now bring that adversity story over into your topic, because if you're talking about leaders, leaders will have had turning points. Leaders will have had hopeless, helpless moments when they didn't know what to do. And so, one of my clients wrote a book called Make the Breast of It, because she had had breast cancer. And what she was talking about was women's professional development, and how even dealing with something as stressful and as scary as breast cancer, you can bring that into your career development, your professional development, your personal development as well.
Wow. Wow. So do we need to use all three of those, or do we just pick one?
Good question. We're digging for gold here, Phil. And so what I do when a client comes to me, a lot of times I work with like executives who have just had a nice exit, or they've left a job after 10, 20 years of running a company, of bootstrapping a startup, having a nice exit, et cetera. And they want to know their next. So what we're looking for is that one thing that fits my C's. I wrote an article for Fast Company about, it's got to be compelling. It's got to go, that's interesting. Tell me more. It's got to be congruent. It's got to be in alignment with your voice and values and vision. It's got to be commercial viable. It can't just be nice. People want to be able to pay for it. And so your question is, do you just pick one? Initially, of all the options available to you, you pick the one that meets all the C's checklist.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we hit three of those A's. You want to clue us into the fourth one, Sam?
You bet. The fourth one is attitude. And I ask people, do you have a favorite quote? Do you have a philosophy about life? I will always be grateful to my college professor, because we studied philosophy. And on the very first day of class, he said, we're going to study Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. But first, you're going to come up with your own philosophy. And our first assignment was to come back to next week with a philosophy under 100 words. And I came up with something then that I have not changed a word of ever since. And that is that my purpose is to make a positive difference for as many people as possible while maintaining a happy, healthy lifestyle with friends and family. So I often ask clients, do you have a favorite quote? Something that's on your wall, something that you carry in your wallet, some advice that someone gave you that resonates, that defines you, that's your North Star. And often with that quote, we can then riff off of it, not rip off of it, riff, just like a piano player would riff off chords to make music. We can riff off quotes to make new brands or presentation titles. So I got a story for that too. Want to hear it?
Absolutely.
Okay, this is another person that many people may know is Scott Halford, who's been involved in the leadership for many years, is a leadership speaker. And he wanted to write a book that would break out in this sea of sameness. So when I asked him this question about A for attitude, he said, I don't really have a philosophy. So I switched it. I said, okay, what is a quote or something you hear and you disagree with it? You think it's wrong. You think that I don't, what you believe flies in the face of it. And he thought about it and he said, you know what? He said, I really don't like that saying there's no shortcuts to success. He says, of course there's shortcuts to success. It's like a coach is a shortcut to success. A really good keynote speaker can be a shortcut to your clarity. A really good consultant can be a shortcut to coming up with a one-of-a-kind brand. Now we need a signature story, right? So I said, okay, Scott, think about your life and a situation where that was very clear. So you don't just introduce the idea as a concept that keeps it abstract. You put people in the scene of the situation. They experience it right along with you. So they have a hallelujah, an aha, an epiphany, and arrive at that conclusion viscerally and not just verbally. And he thought about it and he remembered a time. He had gone rafting. And their boat had gone over a big rock and had flipped. and he was being pulled down by the hydraulic. Even though he had on a life jacket, it would pull him down. And even though he's a strong swimmer and he's doing everything he can to get back to the surface, the water is coming over the rock and keeping him down. He pops up just in time to get a breath of air, and he gets sucked down again, pops up just to get a breath of air. And that time he went down, he was out of air. He didn't know if he was going to come up. And he was very grateful because a kayaker had been seeing this. The kayaker was able to come over, grab him by the back of the life jacket, and haul him out of that river. So that kayaker was a shortcut to his survival, right? Now, let's hook and hinge this, because with all of our signature stories, with all of our insights, it is not enough just to tell them. It's just flat. It's still our story. The way we make our story their story is to do what I call a hook and hinge. And a hook and hinge is the essence, the point of what you're saying, with 3 you questions. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought it was life or death? Have you ever thought this is it? Have you ever had someone come along and pull you out and support you or encourage you or give you a second chance or something like that, right? And so he wrote a whole book about shortcuts to success, and about, hopefully, one of our goals as a leader is to be a shortcut to our employees' success, to be a shortcut to our customers' success. And see, isn't that a fresh take on a very familiar topic?
It is. It is. And it's a great leadership opportunity as well to remind us how we can talk with our team, not just sharing our stories, but also getting them inside of it so that they can feel it a little bit as well. I like that a lot. So let's pivot back a bit to the book here, Sam, because I think it's super instructive to help people understand how to shift their communication. So how can they become more confident when often, what we've learned, what we've experienced, or even often what we've done has not been as effective as we'd like it to be? How do we get that confidence so that we don't have to be so apprehensive about conflict?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the reasons that at the end of every chapter, I put a words to lose, words to use reminder card is that I think confidence is an acquired skill. Put anxiety over on the left. Did you know anxiety can be defined in 2 words? Not knowing. And if we don't know what to say when people are blaming each other, then we're in a state of anxiety. We often say what's on the tip of our tongue and we make it worse. What if on the right, here are options? I don't believe in scripts. There's no formula for success. It's just, here are options of what you can say that will help, that hurt. Because see, if we know what to say, we can be assured instead of anxious. Now, I'll give you one of my favorite examples of that. I had an opportunity to do training for Kaiser Permanente. So I went in as a patient 3 years after I gave that training. And when I walked into the lobby, the receptionist recognized me and she looked around, nobody in the lobby. She beckons me over. She points to the words to lose, words to use reminder card that is still taped to her desk. And she said, Sam, I'm the first point of contact. And they hired me because I'm a friendly person. And I never used to understand why people were so mean to me when I was so nice to them. And then I took your workshop and I saw all those fighting phrases on the left, and I realized I use them all the time. Well, you should tell your doctor about that. Well, there's nothing I can do. We're booked until next week. It's like, well, it's like, I'd like to help you, but it's like, well, there's, you can't, because you should have brought your insurance card and all that. She says, now I keep these friendly phrases in front of me. And when one of those like buts or shoulds or you'll have to's is about to pop out of my mouth, I catch and I correct. And she said, it has transformed the way I show up at work. And people are so much nicer to me now because I know what to say. And so I believe that confidence is keeping this insight in mind, whether it's on our refrigerator at home, whether it's by our laptop at work, whether it's at our office in our building. And if we keep these ideas insight in mind, it moves us from anxiety to assurance, and we're more confident that we can handle these challenging situations.
Awesome. Awesome. Super, super stuff. So Sam, of course, we want to encourage folks to get a copy of Talking on Eggshells. You can learn more from Sam at samhorn.com, just like it sounds. Sam, if people want to get started, though, besides buying the book, obviously we want them to get a copy of the book. But if they want to get started along this path, maybe it's something you've already said that you want to reinforce, or maybe it's something completely new and want to get better at this confidence of communication and cracking that code of those high stakes, what do you recommend they do?
To follow Elvis Presley's advice. You ready for that, Phil? As Elvis Presley said, when things go wrong, don't go with them. So see, over on the left, put wrong, and over on the right, put right. And understand that words have ripple effects. And let me give you a quick example that shows the ripple effect of when we use words that focus on how to do it right instead of scolding people for doing it wrong. I was visiting my son, Andrew, in New York, and his 1-year-old son, Hero, crawled across the floor, climbed up on a guitar over in the corner on a stand, started banging on the strings. Now, over on the left, Andrew could have yanked the guitar away. He could have said no. He could have said, stop banging on the guitar. All of which would have made Hero feel worse and which would have reinforced the dreaded behavior. Over on the right, he said one word. Guess what it was?
No idea.
Gentle. And Phil, I saw Hero's face transform in front of me. And he reached back to the guitar. He went strum, strum, strum. And in that moment, Hero made music. And it was because Andrew shaped his behavior instead of shamed it. He coached him how to do it right instead of criticizing him for doing it wrong. And instead of making him feel bad, he made him feel better so that Hero learned from that situation instead of losing face. So if people want to know what can I do moving forward, it's when something goes wrong, instead of saying the thing that's on the tip of our tongue, which is a reaction, which will almost always make things worse, pause, know what do we want instead of what don't we want? What do we want them to start instead of what we want them to stop? Because now we're shaping what happens next instead of shaming it. People learn instead of lose face, and we're being a coach instead of a critic.
Well, I could have used that this morning when I was dealing with my 8-year-old for sure. So that's awesome stuff, Sam. As always, I appreciate your help. Friends, if you're listening, if you're watching, get to know Sam Horn more. Go to samhorn.com. Get a copy of Sam's awesome new book, Talking on Eggshells, and learn how to be a coach instead of a critic, and pay attention to the right stuff like Sam often teaches us. Sam, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
It's a joy, Phil. Thanks. And I really hope that people are able to use these ideas at work with employees and customers and coworkers and at home. And we could use it online as well.